Bible doesn't name her, so let's just call her Grace. She's a Canaanite girl, and she's ill, tormented by a demon. Maybe she suffers a physical illness, maybe a mental or emotional problem of some kind. We don't know. But what we do know is that her mother is tired of seeing her suffer. She has watched her little girl's torment and anguish, not just from the illness, but from other people's treatment of her. Bad enough that she is sick, but she lives in a culture that believes it's her own fault, or maybe that of her parents. Illness is her just punishment, her deserved penalty for wrong deeds, for misbehavior, for God's disfavor, so she gets little sympathy or comfort or help from those outside her family. But her mother just can't stand by and watch it anymore. She's at her wit's end and willing to do whatever she can to help this daughter that she loves so dearly. She's heard about this man Jesus from over there in Galilee, who is known as a teacher and a healer. Amazing stories of his power and compassion have spread, even into her hometown. He makes blind people see and lame people walk. He claims to work for this God, Yahweh, not a God of her people, but still. Could it be that he has really crossed over into her land? Is he really just down the road? Could he be the answer to her problems, her hope at the end of the rope? Could he possibly bring the much sought after relief that her daughter and she and the rest of the family so desperately need? She decides it's worth a try. Sure, it's risky. Men don't usually speak to women in public. Jews don't have anything to do with Gentiles. A rabbi, a holy one, a clean one, typically goes out of his way to avoid an unclean one like her. But this is her daughter she's concerned about. It's worth the risk. If it helps her, what matter the cost? So she sets out to find Jesus. She's heard talk. Last time she was at the well, she overheard the women chatting of where he was last seen, what part of the region he might still be in. So she hurries in that direction. And while she's traveling, she's no doubt also worrying. Is there any way to get what they both need? Can she get her daughter healed without defiling this holy man? Maybe he can just speak healing words. He doesn't have to go out of his way. He doesn't have to touch her or even see her. If he has tapped into the power of this mighty God, Yahweh, surely that would be enough. Just a word, and she'll know new life. And then suddenly, there he is. He's within shouting distance, so she calls out to him. Maybe she can stay outside the customary boundaries and still get what she and her daughter need so desperately. Show me mercy, Son of David. My daughter is suffering terribly from demon possession. There, she's asked for what she needs. He can just grant her wish and she'll be on her way. But he just ignores her. He pretends he didn't even hear her. So she keeps on pleading for what she needs. If he'll just speak the word, she knows her world will be transformed and life will be good. She doesn't need much, a moment of his time, just a word from his lips, a healing touch. She doesn't want to stop his journey. She doesn't need hours of listening and learning. She doesn't want to deplete him of his resources. Please, Lord. The disciples are embarrassed by this desperate woman. She's making a scene. Jesus, send her away. She's a woman. She's a foreigner. She's unclean. She's a sinner. She's an outsider. She doesn't deserve your help. She's got some nerve coming here asking for your assistance. By now, she's moved a little closer, still pleading, still cajoling. Please, sir, my daughter. So Jesus answers the disciples a little more loudly than necessary. He knows she's within earshot. He won't have to sully himself by speaking to her directly. He can give her an answer without actually answering her. He can say no without having to actually say it. I've been sent to the lost sheep, the people of Israel. She's not my concern. She's not a Hebrew. God sent me to save the Hebrews, the Jews. Now that's a hard image of Jesus for us to wrap our minds around, is it not? Jesus always seems so nice, so polite, so kind and compassionate. But not here. Here he's drawing boundaries, seemingly saving his resources for the ones who are in. There's only so much of him to go around, and he can only take care of the chosen people. But she won't take no for an answer, even an indirect answer as it was. So she throws herself at his feet. Lord, help me. I can't, he answered. It's not good to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. I came as a gift to the Jews, not you Gentiles. Wait, did he just call her a dog? How dare he? Her anger boils up, and then she realizes it will do no good to lash out. Maybe she is no better than a dog. Maybe she doesn't deserve what she's asking for. She didn't earn it. She can't pay for it. She just knows she's desperate for what he can give. So she swallows her anger and her pride and responds, maybe I am no better than a dog, but even dogs get crumbs. And if I'm a dog, I'm going to keep dogging you until I get what I need, just a scrap. That's all I'm asking, Jesus, a crumb. One word from you, one small thing, it will change my daughter's life and mine, and the lives of her brothers and sisters and father. You just say the word. Just heal my daughter, and you will set a whole new world in motion for me and mine. Now, it's hard to say what happened in that moment. It's puzzling, disturbing. Maybe in that instant, Jesus realized that his ministry was in fact intended for all of God's people, including the Gentiles. Maybe it was at that moment that Jesus saw that God's kingdom wasn't about who deserved it and who didn't. Or maybe in that moment, as she spoke those words, Jesus had an epiphany about just how much power God had given him. Like God, he simply had to speak a word, and a whole new world would be set in motion. Healing would occur. Barriers would be broken. Life would be changed. So he smiles at her and tells her that her hope has become reality. Her daughter is healed. And he commends her for her faith. Not for faith that blindly accepts situations that they are, but for faith that works to change them. Not faith that simply follows the rules, but faith that dares to break them if needed. Not faith that suffers silently, but faith that argues and pleads and begs if necessary to get things made right, to see that justice is done, to bring healing and wholeness. She had the faith to not leave it alone, but to persist because God's creation was not as it should be. Change needed to be made, and Jesus had the power to make that change. You know, I think you could chew on this story for a long, long time, right? There's a lot of meat on this one. Maybe it's a story about how, as representatives of Christ, we too are to pay attention to the stranger, the outsider. Perhaps that one has something to teach us about who we are and what we can be. Maybe it's a story that reminds us that sometimes all that's needed is a healing word. Not a lot of time or money. Sometimes a simple, I'm sorry, or I love you, can bring new life. The gospel message in word or deed can change people or situations forever. The story reminds us that we can be like the disciples trying to send the needy away, or we can be Christ-like with the power to speak that life-giving word. Or maybe it's a story about learning to take risks, persisting when you know that something needs to be done. Maybe this woman is a challenge to us to be more ingenuous, less quick to take offense, bolder in our confrontation or obstacles that keep the kingdom from being fully realized. Maybe it's a story about real faith. Here, in this story, worshipful struggle with God is named as real faith, not unbelief. Maybe it's okay to argue with God, to voice what you feel, to complain and beg for what you need. Maybe faith is sometimes about being as tenacious as a dog with a bone. And maybe it's a story that challenges us about who's in and who's out. When we want to draw boundaries, When we want to believe that God loves Methodists and Baptists but couldn't possibly love Russians or Iranians, people who vote that way, or those ne'er-do-wells that live down the street, maybe we need to remember this story again. It's not a story about a woman who converted, who became a good Jew so that her daughter would be healed. It's not a story about a woman who was brilliant enough, glib enough, persuasive enough to convince Jesus to heal her daughter. It's not a story about a woman who was really bad but said all the right words, did all the right things, became really good so that God would heal her daughter. No, instead, it's a story about a spoken word changing the world. It's a story about a girl being healed and how that rippled out, bringing healing to many others. This girl doesn't even appear in the story. This girl did absolutely nothing to earn or deserve this, but this girl is healed through the power of God through Jesus the Christ. This, my friends, is a story of faith. This is a story that's all about grace. Thanks be to God. Amen.